I just want to say a huge thank you to Pathwater, one of the sponsors of Unbound Living. These are water bottles that I do not go anywhere without. I constantly refill it, reuse it. I drop salt in it. It's one of the best things that I've ever come across. If you have not tried Pathwater, you need to. Well, I appreciate you guys joining us again for Unbound Living. With that, I've got Cassandra with me. And you and I met a while back when the podcast studio opened. And I know that you were doing some things, and I know that you're doing another one solo now. And what I think is kind of funny is you call it pain in the Cass. Mm-hmm. So, of course, the play on words is pain in the ass. So I want to know, first and foremost, before you get into anything, because I want to hear about your background, what you do, why are you a pain in the ass? You know, I'm going to ask, if it's a play on words, there's a reason. Yeah. Why do you consider yourself that?
Yeah, I think, that's funny. That's such a good introduction, and what a cool way to get to first meet you is when the studio first opened, and get to podcast out of this studio. And so Pain in My Cass was an original podcast I had started by myself. And Pain in My Cass, I think I'm such a different version of myself now and such a different woman than when I was younger. But I really was such a pain in the ass when I was younger. I was kind of a hot mess. I didn't really know, what I was doing with my life, what my direction or purpose really was. And so for me, everything I'm doing with Pain in My Cass is really speaking to that younger version of me. And sometimes I'll get reviews or feedback from younger girls, and they're keep doing what you're doing. What you're saying is impactful to me. And if that helps even, one young girl, that means a lot to me. So I wouldn't say I'm a pain in the ass anymore. I'm more like a reformed hot mess, but there's always this sassy fire side of me. So I do think Pain in My Cass really fits me.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Well, and that's something you brought up that makes a lot of sense is younger individuals, girls, guys, they need role models. And unfortunately, I think some of that's gone to the wayside, and there's just not great role models out there anymore. Even parents at some points, right? I come from a generation that we grew up, you went outside and you came back in when the street lights were on and all that good stuff. We kind of raised ourselves, which is good and bad, right? But in the same sense, there's still certain things that we took from that generation that we hold true now. And a lot of it's kind of, again, fallen to the wayside. So I know that you said you're trying to set great examples and you've learned a lot from when you were younger. What were some of the things that you think as a younger girl that you did that you, in your words, reformed?
Yeah. Wow. I think sometimes it's so interesting to look back and mm-hmm. really reflect on yourself, especially the younger version of yourself. So I grew up Lake Travis area. Mm-hmm. I went to Lake Travis High School, and I always feel people when they look at me, they see a pretty tall blonde girl mm-hmm. who maybe has not been through a lot of hard things or experienced a lot of adversity. And I think that's so fascinating sometimes because people will just judge you by what they see on the surface and mm-hmm. not really know the full depth of your story. Mm-hmm. And I also think, growing up in Lake Travis, which is a very wealthy area, and being around successful and wealthy people, mm-hmm. I learned a certain way to carry myself and to interact and engage with people. So I think sometimes there's this stigma with myself that I come from money or I grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth mm-hmm. when in reality I've just taught myself, how to carry myself with manners and correct morals and engage with people in a way that I saw growing up. Mm-hmm. And
something that's not really done today.
Yeah.
At all.
No. Yeah. I forget sometimes even, I feel manners is kind of a lost art or etiquette, you know? So I'm very thankful for growing up in that environment around successful people, because it did teach me so many things at a young age. But I feel like my youth was like, it was really like treading water. Being like a teenage girl, an adolescent girl is something I don't wish upon anyone. You know, I'm very thankful to be 30 years old and be a woman at this point in my life and not have to deal with all the trials and tribulations that I did at that age. You know, but growing up, it was hard for me. I had a lot of struggles with mental health. I kind of grew up in like an abusive household as well. And it almost feels like, you know, like keeping up with the Joneses in some ways. Like everything looked good on the outside of my home, like very suburban, very clean cut. But in the inside, it was very dark.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's wild how many individuals, when you know, peel some of those layers off, that things like that have happened, right? And we all deal with things in different ways, but usually the outcome can be pretty positive, right? It definitely doesn't seem like that when it's happening and at that point. So that's awesome to hear that you've taken some of that and turned it into a positive, because, you know, truly your past is what's brought you to where you are today, you know, and that's one of the things. No one can ever fault you for your past, right? You should learn from any and everything, positive and negative, and become that person you want to be based on those experiences. Not everybody can do that, though. Not everybody can step back out of that arena and be able to take it forward in a positive manner, and hopefully affect others in a positive way. So that sounds tremendous that you are doing that. With that, you know, do you have certain expectations that you would like to see out of this podcast? I know you said you wanted to touch people and hopefully help individuals.
Yeah.
What are some of those stories maybe that you have told?
Yeah, you know, it's one of the big themes for me this year in 2025 is being seen, which I feel like it's so much easier said than done.
Now define that. What do you mean by being seen?
I feel like,
because, I mean,
Yeah.
you're a tall girl,
Yeah.
long blonde hair, and you'd make D1 babies,
Yeah.
right? You know, so what do you mean?
yeah. So being seen, like, so for example, if I'm like working out at the gym and people see me walk by, I know people notice me. I know I'm seen. Even if I want to be heads down just in my own world, I know that people are paying attention to me because I'm so tall. If that makes, like, it's hard to miss me.
Yep.
I think being seen fully for myself is something that's different. And like I said, you know, I grew up wealthy environment. I know how to carry and portray myself. And so with that, there's almost sort of like a mask, I would say, because there's the version of myself that I'm presenting to the world. And then there's the version of myself that I actually am. Like if you look at my social media, for example, it's just like pretty pictures or me traveling. It's not seeing the authentic version of myself. And, you know, when I say that I struggled when I was younger, like, I mean, I was drinking heavily, like 14, 15, 16 years old.
Wow.
I was running around Dirty Six with like a fake ID at like 16 years old. Like, I was doing things and living life in such a crazy way. Just like drugs, alcohol, just finding any way to fill anything or cope. That it's like, I want to show other women that it's going to be okay and you can show up for yourself and take care of yourself. And I think especially being a 30-year-old single woman, growing up in the suburbs the way I did, with a really, really amazing mom who always was like talking about, you know, like Disney princesses and some guy's gonna come and save you someday. And really having to reframe that for myself and tell myself that I'm the savior of my own story.
No, that's so true, because that's what's that saying? You won't be able to find anybody unless you're good with yourself and being by yourself and things like that. There's a lot of truth to that, right? So it sounds like you've done a ton of healing from then till now.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was in the bar industry, very similar. You know, you're in an environment, and we drank all the time. And it wasn't, I never thought I had a problem until I had to leave the scene for like 6 months. Because there became a point where we would start drinking at like 6 p.m. and I couldn't remember past midnight. And I would wake up either at my house, someone else's house. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know who I was with. I didn't know where my car was. And that's scary.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I had to remove myself from that for a while just to get control. But it's so easy to fall into that because of the fact that at least when you've got any type of substance in your body, you don't feel. Right? I had a ton of issues myself just feeling or being able to accept feelings. And that was on my own. I came from a great family. Right. I didn't have any of those issues. But for some reason, I still fell into that path because it felt easier to me. But it's wild when you start talking to people, how many people have kind of fallen into that, you know, and a lot of things actually trigger those actions, you know, and a lot of it can be past hurts or past scars that you're trying to cover up. And it's huge to have and to be an individual that can recognize that and go, this is why I did this. And this is how I can change it. So kudos to you for being able to do that. And it sounds like, you know, 2025 is going to be your year that you want to shine.
I think so.
Yeah. No, it's gonna. Not you think. It's going to.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, you know. One of the things that you and I had connected on is a while back I got, you know, hammered for, which I don't really give a shit. You know, I find it comical when people bitch at anything that I have to say. It's just whatever, right?
Yeah.
And that probably comes with age, but I've always been like that since I was little. It got me in a ton of problems, and I got in fights all the time because of my mouth and everything else. But at the end of the day, whatever. But I had said that my sons had no game, you know, and it's something that I feel 100%, you know. And one of the things that we had connected over was dating, you know, dating in Austin and, you know, dating in general, right? If they had dating apps back in my day, I don't know, or cell phones, I don't know what type of shit. Well, I know what type of shit I would have been caught with, but it's in the same sense, right? I can't imagine growing up when you did having these dating apps and things like that, and the lack of respect, communication, and chivalry. I'll call it out, right? You know, boys are not men. I don't know what it is. You know, we're training. And I say training, not teaching, training our boys to do stuff like that, right? It's funny, my wife and I last night, my wife is my best friend, could never get anything better than her, and she's my queen, right? I will always look at her that way. And we were talking last night of, you know, I don't understand why guys don't treasure women, you know? Women are a treasure. I couldn't do what I do without my wife. You know, she's very role driven, still lets me lead the house, which, you know, in some cases is, you know, people look at as, you know, misogynistic or what. It's not. It works. You know, it's in the Bible. It works in nature. It is what it is. Now, granted, I'm not going to say that she doesn't help drive that, because she does. And if I get off track, she's the first one to go, hey, why don't you pull back over here? And I'm going to listen to her, because she has no MO other than our success. So with that said, what are you seeing in the dating arena, if you would?
Wow. Okay. Well, first of all, I just have to say that I really admire you and your wife from like an outside perspective, and just seeing how you guys operate. Because as a single woman, I do, you know, look at other couples and kind of observe and see how they interact with one another. And I feel like the way that you and Bristol have it, how it seems to me, is almost like you're the CEO in the relationship and she's the COO. And we both know that at a company, COO is operations. Like they're in there doing way more than you can even imagine, even if the CEO's the leader. And so when I'm looking for someone, I look for something like that. I think that's very powerful. And the other thing too is with like the dating apps, and I question this all the time. I'm like, I feel like men are so desensitized from the dating apps that it's like they'll see a beautiful woman or a couple of them or whatever, and they just don't even care because they're a dime a dozen. Like you go on a dating app, it's swipe, 10 out of 10. Like it's not like back in the day, probably how I would imagine, like you see a beautiful woman and, you know, you're not going to see someone like that again. So you go up and you say something to her. Even, you know, when I was younger, like a few years back when dating apps were not around, I feel like I had men approach me more or say things to me like, you're so pretty or you're so beautiful. And I don't ever get that validation from men. I'm not saying I need that validation. I give that validation to myself. But I think there's a lot of men who look at me and would think that I'm getting so much validation from so many men, but it's not happening. And I'm almost like, do men still like women anymore?
Right.
You know, like that's a tough question to ask. And then also being in Austin, I don't know.
You never know.
You never know.
In Austin,
you know?
for sure.
I don't know if the men are as masculine here as I would like them to be, being in the great state of Texas.
No shit, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I was even telling you earlier before we started recording, I was like, I was trying to put myself in an environment where I thought a high value man would be. So I went and got an Equinox membership because I was like, I always was like fascinated. I was like, this is where the high value people are. And I went and started working out there, and it's just the gays and the girls who are doing Pilates. So, you know,
that wasn't it. That wasn't it,
that
right?
wasn't it. Yeah.
You know, it's what I think has been lost in it. It's multiple reasons, right? You have the apps, you have social media, you have phones, right? You can text, and most communication happens through text, which blows my mind. It's good for quick conversation. You want to talk to me? Call me. You know, there's inflection in your voice. I can't read your tone, you know, and I've always been of the mindset that written word always comes across negative, no matter what, right? And it doesn't mean you intend it that way, right? So hearing someone's voice and their inflection in their tone is huge. That doesn't happen anymore. I look at a lot of the dating apps as a way to get laid, and that's it. It's like you like them, you don't. And I don't know if that's the fact, but that's what it seems like, right?
Right.
And the chase is gone. Most of the fun is the chase, and it's just like that in nature, right? Even when lions hunt, they don't just go and kill. They chase their prey, because a lot of it is the chase. And that's a lot of the fun part, right? Between men and women is that chase. And that's gone. And it goes back to guys don't have game. 9 times out of 10, the only thing you would, and let me ask you, just to see if I'm correct. If you had a guy just come up and strike up a conversation anywhere, you could be at the grocery store, you know, and you can tell cheesy pickup lines versus just communicating.
Yeah.
Does that not pique your curiosity a little bit more?
Oh, yeah, it totally does. And I have a good example of this the other day. So I went to Sweet Green and I was ordering a salad and I was standing in line. And the guy behind me was like asking me about what I was ordering. And he was flirting with me, but I didn't realize that he was flirting with me because he just was casually trying to ask me about what was good at the restaurant. And I was like, that was a really great way for him just to kind of strike up conversation. I wasn't like, ooh, you know, why is this weirdo trying to talk to me? He was just being a normal human, striking up conversation. But I feel like people don't even strike up conversation with strangers anymore. So that going into dating, that makes it even tougher.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, like, as a woman too, I do feel like you kind of have to let a guy know that you're interested.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I call it like the handkerchief method, whether that's eye contact or a smile. Like, you have to be open to receiving.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times too, it's when I was young, I would approach people in conversation, whether it was networking or if I was interested in a girl, just to try, right? Practice, right? You have to practice these things. You have to practice doing podcasts and talking in front of a camera. You have to, practice networking or trying to sell a product. It's the same thing with dating. But unfortunately, all of those have fallen off to the wayside, including sales, right? So I've even tried to talk my kids into, if you're going to do something, be in sales.
Right.
Have an ability to communicate with someone else, and you will kill, because no one knows how to do it anymore. Similarly with dating and relationships. So that's what blows my mind. And I hope that it gets better for you in the entire generation. Again, I tease and I still tease them. They still don't have any game. It was kind of funny. I'm very much of the mindset that everything's built around communication. Didn't used to be that way. Very, alpha, machismo, everything, right? And that was a lot of the bar industry, right? We didn't necessarily have to try to pick up people. And so I didn't need to. It wasn't until my wife that I understood communication.
Yeah.
And a lot of times she would want to communicate. I would shut down, and she just wouldn't let that happen. She'd be like, cool, I can come back to this subject in 30 minutes. And she would.
Yeah.
And so it was a learned behavior. So maybe it's a learned behavior from some of these other kids, but they've got to learn how to do it. That's what's so impressive with individuals that I meet. And if they can communicate well, it's awesome. And I love seeing it in the younger generation.
Right.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I love that you call your wife a queen. Mm-hmm. Because I think sometimes I feel like my advice on dating is so different than some of the younger girls or other women or even guys, because I'm looking for my divine partnership with someone. And so divine partnership is like that king and queen energy. And I know you're a very alpha male, protector, provider for your wife. And me over here, I'm a single, hyper independent, been doing it all on my own the last 30 years. But I want a alpha type male. So I am always questioning myself what that looks like that submission piece, if that makes sense. And I mean that with the most respect. But I do want to submit to someone, and that's hard when you've been running around doing it all by yourself. I'm like, oh, I can't be a smart ass to my partner and not communicate correctly and then want him to lead us, in the relationship.
Yeah. But I think a lot of that comes back to communication.
Yeah.
It was funny. I saw something on social media, and they were chopping up, betas and alphas, and then the introduction of the sigma, who does not have to show that he's the alpha. He knows that he's the alpha, and he can sit back a little bit and have a strong woman have a presence in his life and still allow her to do some of those things, and have her own strength and her own wherewithal, but still have the pattern of traditionalism. I love that my wife is strong. Love it. But similarly, she has it in her heart that she's also very traditional. She was a very high-level corporate girl, made a ton of money and everything else. And it's wild how that happens, but that's a mindset, right? There's also something that I heard that this girl said, that I want a man to be so masculine that he puts me in my femininity. And I think what that what that is again, that's not a negative thing. Women should feel feminine. Women want to be protected big time, right? And you can call it financially, physically, whatever. A woman feels loved when she is protected. Emotionally, everything, right? So it's not just from a physical standpoint. And that was something that took me a while to really kind of understand. However, it makes sense. If you feel like you are getting what you need and what is needed in your heart and your soul, you are going to do the exact same thing in response for that, right? So it's almost a game sometimes of who can be the most supportive or sweeter, right? If my wife does something for me, I'm immediately like, all right, well, not a one up, but
Right.
you want to respond in a loving manner. We don't fight. She refuses to fight, which is something I've never had before, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
What's that going to do? You're going to be upset with one another, and she just doesn't let it happen. It doesn't mean we don't bicker at each other or something like that, but then it'll end real quick because one of us will crack a joke because it's just not worth it, you know? But that came from communication. And I've said it 100 times, but we literally sat down when we started dating and drew our boundaries and said, this is cool, this isn't cool. Never any name calling, never overstep this boundary, never do this. This is a deal breaker. And then it was all out on the table. So you already knew your boundaries. And I think that's huge.
Yeah. And I feel like what you're saying, too, is just reiterating that we need each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, males and females need that partnership, and that's so important. I get worried so many times when I'll see, like, stats about the percentage of, women over 30 that are still single or not having children, or the agenda that single women are being pushed to just spend more money on materialistic items and, work on their careers and not focus on finding their partner. Because I don't think we're meant to be on this earth to be alone. I think we're meant to have a partner like Adam and Eve. And just what you're saying, that's what's so beautiful about having a relationship like you have with your wife. It's almost like, if you're having a bad day, she can pour a little bit more into you, and in the reverse, you can pour a little bit more one day when it's like that partnership is so important for humans,
And I don't think, and now we're going to start going down conspiracy lanes, but I think it was done intentionally.
Yeah.
They don't want a strong family unit. They don't. They don't want us having kids. They don't want... everybody is stronger together, and there's been division no matter what for years. And a lot of that started in back when women were pushed, or not pushed, but encouraged to get out into the workforce. And it doesn't mean that women shouldn't do that, but the way that it was done in such a negative way that it compromised that family unit. Because again, strength comes from that family unit. And if you look at years ahead after that had started, you started looking at fatherless homes and, single moms with kids, and, divorce rate went through the roof and things like that. And that was the destruction of that unit. And it's been pushed, because any division is good for evil, right? And there's a lot more evil. We were talking about this earlier. There's more evil on this earth than there seems to be good, but it's shifting. But I think it's also death by 1,000 cuts, right? You don't know that it's happening. You think that these things are positive. Well, when you look at some of those things, what is it hurting? And I don't think that people have asked that. Even with phones, right? We spend more and more time, and I'm guilty of it. But, and there's times where my wife will look at me and go, and she'll do the same thing, right? And I do it right back at her, or we're at dinner and we'll look around, and, couples are across from one another and they're on their phones, and we're like, we don't want to be that, right?
Yeah.
But that's just another divide between men and women. And it's like that with everything, and that's the sad part.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting, too, because they say, like, women, when we go, like, sit to hang out with our girlfriends, we sit across the table from each other. We're, like, gossiping or, having a glass of wine. When guys hang out, statistically they go sit side by side more so, whether they're watching like a game on a TV or having a beer, they're not looking across at each other and having that conversation. And I think it's interesting because I can only talk to the female experience, right, of what's going on in the world of dating and the career-focused woman. But I will say for me, I feel like I've woken up at 30 and looked at the last few years I've spent in corporate America, where I'm just burning myself to the ground every day, like setting my routine and schedule to function almost like a man when our bodies and biological clocks are so different, like getting up so early, working out so hard, taking 25,000 meetings a day. And I turned 30 in December, and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? Like this is not what I want. Like, I want a home and a family and babies running around. And I'm like, this whole situation is not set up in a way that I feel like is benefiting me. And deeper than that, it's the connection and community piece that we're missing since COVID. Because at least prior to COVID, I went to an office, so I would dress nice. There was like potential suitors in my office. Now I'm burning myself out at my desk, working 10, 12-hour days, staring at a fucking computer screen. I'm like, how am I supposed to meet Prince Charming when I'm sitting in my apartment by myself, burning myself down? You know?
And it goes back to that intentional action. You know, I don't think that was something that was not strategically planned. Again, you know, when you start pouring evil into something, you have to separate individuals instead of bringing them together, right? And it's politically, it's everything else. And, you know, it's either left or right. There is no more middle ground. And that's sad. You know, I think the last time there was truly middle ground was Reagan. You know, and then you look at individuals like RFK and Tulsi Gabbard. They're truly middle, you know, and hopefully some of that's going to start rolling back around. And again, that's a division thing, right? It's almost more fun to be divided than it is together. However, you know, people really need to understand that there's more power together. You don't have to agree with 100% of what someone does to still come together and find peace, right? I've got a friend that politically we see completely opposite sides of the, you know, of the spectrum. We can talk about things, give each other a high five, and go on. That's gone. You know, I mean, in a nation, right? You can't do that. We can, and we don't understand why other people can't, right? I can see things that he's stating and vice versa, and we can still have different beliefs and go on our merry way and still be friends. It's unfortunate that a lot of that has come to an end, but I'm hoping some of that's going to come back around, you know?
It's funny because I had my first experience with something similar to that this past year. Around 2020, with Trump being elected for the first time, I was very public with my views on the election and everything. And after, you know, friends not agreeing with me and seeing the kind of pushback I got, I went really silent with my political beliefs. And I was telling you earlier, when Trump got reelected this year, I woke up the next day and I felt like a sense of peace, because for me, I was so terrified of the opposite outcome just for the U.S. losing democracy, like entirely. And
a true sense of losing democracy, not the current definition.
Like I was terrified, and I posted some things online on my story. Like I have a sense of humor around. I can still see from both sides in terms of I'll respect your beliefs. We can make fun of things. It's not a big deal to me. And so when he won, I ordered a shirt from Amazon, like Prime delivery, and it said "Daddy's home," with like Trump outside the White House. And I posted something on my story, and one of my girlfriends was unfortunately unable to come to my 30th birthday because I posted that.
Wow.
That to me was shocking, because she texted me almost like it was a personal attack on her. And it was just the most bizarre thing.
Isn't it crazy what that division has done? And at the end of the day, it's like, why are individuals upset about that, right? If his name was Jim Smith, let's say Trump decided not to run, but Jim Smith ran under the same, the same things that Trump wanted to run under, would it had that same effect? I can't. No one can say the things that are being done are bad right now, and I know that, the DEI stuff and all of that, I'm glad that's gotten rid of. No one should perform a job that they are not qualified to do, period.
Right.
I mean, that makes sense. It's causing issues. It's causing issues in the airlines and the air traffic control, and it's sad that it's starting to come to a head now. But that's with anything, right? You wouldn't hire, a kid that bags groceries at H-E-B to be a surgeon.
Right.
Why? Help me understand why that would be a good thing. Yeah. But unfortunately, some people, you will never change their beliefs, and that's okay. But don't think that I'm a bad person just because I believe this way. It's like if you like cheeseburgers and I like tacos, what's the difference? Yeah. We like to eat, and that's part of that division that's sad, and I don't know what will help bring it together.
I know. And I feel like that's what scares me, and is that authenticity and connection piece of society. And I feel like even this year why I've called to like podcast more is to put my own authenticity out there, because the world is moving so fast. Everything that's happening with AI, I just feel like technology in general, by the time it's 2030, I feel like the things that are happening with AI, I don't even know if humans are going to be having our own thoughts, or if we're going to have like a chip in our head where part of our thought is talking to Chat GPT. It's
scary.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's scary. I use it, here and there all the time, and it's wild how smart it is, right? So, and that goes back to a thing of it's a two-sided sword, right? I'm like, this is a really great tool, but at what point is it going to replace things and people, right? But it's scary, right? I don't want it to be, but it kind of is, Right. But that's the future, and how do you deal with that, right? It's going to be an interesting next couple of years for sure. So I'm going to pull back.
Okay.
So what is your suggestion in your advice to guys, especially when A, approaching a girl, or B, the things that girls truly are looking for? And the reason why I ask that is I think the entire mindset is rolling back. I think girls now are seeing that they want more of a man in their lives. I think they see a lot of these soy boys and they're like, not so much. I think they may have had their glory, but that's not what they want, and they see their dads, or hopefully a lot of their dads, they always want what's best for a little girl. I always wanted a daughter, never had one. I have a pseudo daughter that I lean on quite heavily, but there's a reason why I never had a daughter, because I would have locked her in a room until she was 30 and fed her under the door.
Right.
So again, with that said, what are some of the things you are looking for in a guy, and what are things that guys need to know?
Yeah. I think this is a hard thing. And like, I will say this, I feel like for both men and women when dating, I feel like you have to ask yourself, would you want to date yourself? And if the answer is no, then maybe you need to work on yourself some more and show up for yourself a little bit more. Because I know for me, when I'm looking for a partner, I'm looking for someone better than me. I'm looking for someone that inspires me, that motivates me, that pushes me to be a better version of myself. And unfortunately, I've found that really, really difficult. And I don't even feel like the qualifications to meet baseline are, I will say, okay, I am tall. I talked about this. So I do look for a taller man. I think the percentage of men that are over 5'10" that make over 6 figures in the U.S. is very, very small. Like I want to say like between 2 and 10 So just even meeting someone at the baseline of where I'm at in my own life, I feel like is a little bit difficult. But then I want someone who motivates me to be better, you know? I want someone who takes care of their mind, body, and soul. You know, we're in the collective. This is a home where so many people spend time taking care of their body and their physiques and worry about nutrition and the things that they're putting in their body. And I want someone that takes care of their vessel and shows up for themselves. And that goes across everything, like mind, body, soul. Like, what are you doing to improve upon yourself every day? And I expect the same for myself. I'm continuously like reading books and trying to work out and be a better version of myself. And then you have to think about the men or women who are doing those things, that are showing up, taking care of themselves, working out, make over 6 figures, that they have all the options. You know, there was one guy I was dating for a little bit. He was 6'4". He was probably 2 years younger than me and had a very successful business. He was an entrepreneur. And I was so drawn to him because he was an entrepreneur, but so was every other female. And I knew that he was playing with me. He was playing with lots of other women. And good for him, because he did have his options open. He did reach that peak for himself, where then he could look and choose what he was looking for in a woman, you know, and every woman wanted him, you know? So my advice to the men is to take care of yourself and pour that love into you, you know? Because I feel like sometimes it's easier for females to be like, oh, self-love, take a bubble bath, like all this self-care thing, but it's equally as important for men, you know? Matt Lupi, is that how you say his last?
I love Matt.
Yeah, I follow him on Instagram, and I just look at him as someone who's like a very high value man, because I see the things that he posts where he's working out, he's taking care, he shows up for himself, you know? And that's what everyone should be doing.
Yeah, no, it's funny you bring him up. He is by far one of my favorite people at this place.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know, he even started a meal prep service. I order stuff from him. He is truly one of my favorite people on this planet.
Yeah.
You know?
And I probably haven't even told him this, but he's someone that inspires me.
Really?
You know what I mean? And it's like those people that are doing those things that like push themselves to be a better version, that's what I look for in someone.
You know what I think helps him a lot too is community.
Yeah.
He's involved in a lot of groups. And I will have to say that is one thing about the collective, is there's so many groups and they're all intertwined. It's not like cliques. They're independent groups, but they all mesh together.
Right.
And there's just a lot of just good people here, especially your age.
Yeah.
North, south, everything. And they all just come together. They all spend time with each other inside and outside of the gym. But he's by far one of my favorite people in this place. One of the things that I would say that I would tell guys is it's okay to approach a girl.
For sure.
You know, most girls don't get approached ever. There's nothing wrong with treating a girl like a queen. At the end of the day, you want to protect, and that comes across in so many different ways, the things that you cherish, right? There's a reason you look at a girl or look to a girl. You're looking for that softness, that nurturing, that caring, those things that even with age and appearance, because those things can disappear, but those other things will never disappear. And you know, again, I understand being a young dude, my perspective was completely different, and women were toys. Right. And I get it, but I was very open about that. I never hid it from anybody. I never, you know, I just said, look, I'm dating a ton of people. Until I find that perfect person, it is what it is. Yeah. And they appreciated that. However, treat girls well. Open the doors for them. You know, take them on dates. Don't look to them to buy dinner. Don't, traditionalism. There's
Yes.
nothing wrong with that. I think that,
Chivalry.
yes,
Yeah.
if you can do that, that will melt a girl in a heartbeat because they're not used to that.
Yeah, it's like I really feel like sometimes I wish I could be a guy because I'm like, God, it's just the littlest things that like make women so happy. Like, for example, if you're going on a date with a girl, maybe like offer to call her an Uber to the restaurant, or, I even like flowers. Like that's
Yeah.
so cliche. Guys don't send flowers.
Yeah.
I don't even think it's not cheap, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
Like the amount of joy you're gonna give to someone.
One of the things that I did for my wife, and we joke about it, but
Yeah.
I had noticed, well on that she liked sweet tea.
Yeah.
And I picked her up and I had stopped at Rudy's and bought her a sweet tea and had it in the truck. And she was just like blown away by that. Something so tiny can mean so much because it shows that you're paying attention.
Right. And it's not even about like wealth either.
Or the cost of it or anything, yeah.
Because like if you're a young man and you're starting out your career, women, we can't expect you to be like a 50-year-old successful man
Yeah.
at the point you'll be with your finances and your career. It's like the little things. Like if it's her birthday, you don't have a ton of money to take her to a nice steakhouse, cook her dinner. Like
Exactly.
it's the
Sometimes
little
that
things.
means more.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, even on Valentine's Day, that's what Bristol wants. That's
Yeah.
what we'll do. We'll go have a dinner another night, but it almost seems like every cheesy dude who doesn't do shit for their partner always takes their wife or their girlfriend out on Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
It's like the one time that they have to step up,
Yeah.
But it's those little things. And I understand too, the salary aspect or the amount of money a person makes. Unfortunately, and fortunately, it does show drive, right? And some of the things that I often point up is I've always kind of been a blue collar guy, right? And I push kids and young kids to get into trades, especially because they're going to be the next millionaires,
Right.
because it's something that's lost. And those are entrepreneurs as well, and something that people as a whole are missing is drive. And so sometimes you have to measure that by income, right? Because you're like, to get to a certain peak or income level, you had to have a certain amount of drive to get there. So it's a measurement of drive, because how else do you measure it, right?
Yeah.
Unless you truly know that person. So get off your ass, right? Have some drive, show women respect, tell them they're beautiful. Those things are great. They're little,
Yeah.
and they'll make all the difference in the world.
Yeah. I also think women are multipliers.
What do you mean by that?
So I feel like
Outside of the of course, they have babies. Yeah.
they have babies. I mean, so even at our core, biologically, we are multipliers. But I feel like, there's never a point per se when you're going to be fully ready for your partner in life. And I have to think just even you and your wife, like the partnership that you have, like sure, you guys could have had your own levels of success before you met each other, but that partnership and that union together, your wife pouring into you the way she does with her feminine energy, it's like you guys are building something so much greater than individually, that she's multiplying everything you're doing right alongside next to you, and that's kind of how you guys are like building an empire together.
100%. Because again, I couldn't do what I do without her.
Yeah.
And that's her job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She has to pour into me, because there's times where I'll come home and I'm like, fuck it, I'm selling everything. I'm tired of this shit. I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And she goes, okay. And then 5 minutes later, she's like, is there anything that I can do for you?
Yeah.
And it's those things that sometimes go unseen. She'll hear me have my little, piss fit or whatever, and she just goes, okay, we can do that if you want. I'll support you.
Right.
And then I know that that's not really what I want, and she knows that that's not it, right?
Yeah.
But it's to have that, it's yin and yang, right? And individuals need that. We've just, again, been apart for so long that it's hard to come together, and it's okay. It's very much like guys should be supportive of guys. I speak of that all the time. Guys are supposed to support other guys just like women are supposed to support other women. There's nothing wrong with telling your guy, man, I love you, brother. You know, I'm stronger with you. Thank you for helping me through this and helping me through that. You know, it's the whole thing with Brad and this whole High Rocks thing. It was tough for me, you know. I had issues with it, you know, emotionally because my dad and everything else. And he didn't even know that he stepped up the way that he did.
Yeah.
But that's what guys need, you know, and that's important to have in life, especially as guys and girls and this, that, and the other, but even more so with a couple.
Yeah. I think I can't even imagine what it's like as a male in 2025 right now, but sometimes I that community and connection piece is so important because sometimes I even question myself. I'm like, what can I do to like pour into my guy friends and like a health, like support them? Because it's like, if you're a single man and you're not getting that connection and you haven't found your person yet, it's like, that's tough. Like, it's tough. I think sometimes I'm like, oh, it's so tough to be a female, but I'm like, fuck, it's really tough to be a man.
I wouldn't want to be my boys, right? You know, we got away with so much stuff as kids, you know, and I say kids, I mean, even young adults, right? And it's a lot of that's even due to society, right? I mean, how do you flirt with a girl? How do you approach a girl without, some negative connotation or, you know what I mean? And so because we got away with shit back in the day that there's no way we could have done, but it just was what it was, you know, it wasn't offensive or anything else, but we've just become too PC, right?
Right.
So I get some of that, but then again, I've also always been the mindset, I don't give a fuck what anybody thinks about me, I'm going to do it anyway. But not everybody's like that, you know?
Right. But you're authentically yourself, which I feel like more people need to do because that's when you're going to draw in the right people for you. Yeah.
100%.
And it's like, I've been around like girlfriends before, and a guy will come and say something to them or hit on them, and then the guy walks away and they're like, ew, like, why did he come up to me or why did he think he can do that? And sometimes I'll just sit there and I'll be like, actually, wow, the fact that that guy came up to you.
Had the balls and did it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think as women, we need to be nicer and more open to receiving that, to show men that that's okay and you should be doing that. And we just have to be the ones that handle it in whatever receptive way we want to handle it in, right? Like, that doesn't mean that has to be your husband because he came up and said, oh, you're beautiful. Yeah.
And it's kind of difficult to state that you want that if you're rejecting it when it happens.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If that's what you want, if you want that chase, if you want that traditionalism, you can't shun it when it happens. Like, to your point, it doesn't mean that, it's obvious. You're attracted to someone by their appearance right out of the gate. It is what it is. You can't ever change that.
Right.
But how many times have you gotten to know somebody and you're like, I never would have given this person a second chance, but wow, they're really pretty cool.
Right.
And if you shun those things away, you'll never know.
Right.
And that's the thing that's kind of funny. But yeah, that's the other thing for girls at least. If you want that, don't reject it.
Yeah. And it's also like, why can't we open that up to friendship as well? Like, I mean, I know no one wants to be put in the friend zone too, but who knows? Like, you could have like a beautiful friendship that comes out of just acknowledging another human being, something that's very simple to do.
That person could introduce you to your, forever person.
Yeah. You don't know. They could have been having the worst day ever and you just made their day by smiling back at them and saying hi. You really don't know.
100%.
Yeah.
You never know what anybody's dealing with. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you. This was, of course, very easy.
So easy. So fun.
And I do appreciate you. And hopefully you guys have learned a little bit of something, especially you guys out there, about how to approach women. And it's okay, And is there anything that you would like to say in closing? I know that, this is Unbound Living, and one of the things we like to talk about are things that are outside the norm. And I think the conversation you and I had was outside the norm, especially for a lot of guys,
Yeah. No, I just hope, that this helps with dating in some way for anyone, that, it's okay to approach someone. Women are not against men approaching us. And the right person, if you approach the right person and you show up authentically, then that's the person for you. You can't fake anything that's not real. And anyone that's meant for you, I truly believe in divine timing and godly relationships. And I think if that person's meant for you, then they're meant for you. So
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I'm sure we can do this again if you want.
This was so fun.
Awesome.
It's so easy. You're the
Yes.
best.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike.